Hello, Harrison. I am Joe Moss. I'm one of the owners of JTM Food Group. Happen to also be a registered pharmacist in the state of Ohio. It's a long story. My dad, back when I got out of high school, decided I needed to go on to doing something else. I ended up, by the time I graduated, ended up staying, working with my dad in the business. But we're not here to talk about me today. We're here to talk to Jeff Biddle about the Village Pharmacy, which I happen to shop at myself, and I've known Jeff for a very, very long time. I graduated in '81, Jeff graduated in '80, so we're of the same, roughly the same age. But Jeff, you've been in the pharmacy business for most of your life, and as I understand it, your dad was a pharmacist as well. So I'll let you take it from here to explain to us a little bit about the history of this pharmacy.
Okay. Well, as I say, I've owned a pharmacy myself since January of 1989. I bought it from a fellow named Carl Grenham, who had owned it for roughly 28 years, who bought it from my father, who had it for about 10 years. And there's been a variety of owners going back all the way as far as we can trace to 1868. Now, it wasn't quite in the same location. I'm not sure when it moved into this spot. It had to be in the late teens, early 20s, because we've seen some signs down the street of Marvin Drugs, and that was kind of considered the founder of the pharmacy. He was the second owner, but Dr. J.P. Marvin, Marvin Roden Harrison's named after his family. That's kind of the founding father, shall we say.
Well, this location, or this pharmacy, has been looking over the health of this community for a very, very long time.
Oh, no question about that. Yeah.
So a little bit more about the pharmacy. I know that you bought it from the gentleman that bought it from your dad, and then when you took it over in '89, I see a lot of historical stuff back here on the shelves.
Yeah.
And I assume that that came with the inventory.
Right, yeah. Basically, I will say a lot of the relics are things that my dad had personally and passed down. In back of us, we see the famous X-Lax thermometers and a barometer from Vic Sav. When my dad owned the store, it was called Paul's Drugs. So we've got some of the memorabilia there, as well as some things from other owners of the pharmacy in the past. Once again, a lot of these things, people see our relics there. They bring in things they find in their garage or whatever. So a lot of the stuff came from here. Some of it came from some other pharmacies that had closed up in town, and some are just people in town. Oh, I like that. I don't need it. You use it here.
Besides coming down here to get my prescriptions filled, I also enjoy to come to the Village Pharmacy because I normally run into somebody that I know here. It's a bit of a social gathering as well, of just folks that know each other. As a matter of fact, while I was waiting to get the camera set up and to start the interview, I ran into a couple of people today even that I knew. So you've just definitely, you're like that pivoting guy that just knows a whole lot of people in the Harrison area.
I guess I go back to the old Mayberry type of scenario with Andy Griffith. A couple of weeks ago, at one point there were about 4 fellas in here. I think only one actually came in to see me for something, but the others just walked in and started having a conversation among themselves right here and there, and that went on for 10-15 minutes. So yeah, people just come in, maybe not necessarily for prescriptions, but just for anything else, and it's a gathering spot.
And we do have to point out, I mean, you actually fulfill another important spot in this community. You've served on the school board for a number of years, and certainly the education of our children in this community is the most important thing that we gotta make sure we take care of. It for the vitality of the community. Education is everything.
Oh, absolutely. And I always tell people, well, maybe I've got to go to college. You don't necessarily have to go to college. I think you go into a field that you love, because if you end up with a job that you love, it's not really work. Maybe that's a strange way to put it, but whether you go into pharmacy, and when you go into pharmacy, you can take other paths. Look at yourself, going into the family business, and I've seen people go into other areas as well out of the pharmacy degree. Same thing goes. I mean, if a kid that wants to go into the military, into the just take up a trade, the main thing is find a path you like and love. It isn't work. It's a job, but it isn't work. You enjoy it every day.
they should definitely go to school, to college to become pharmacists, because somebody as dumb as you and me can pass
That's
it.
right.
Anybody must
That's
be able to
right.
pass
There
it.
you go.
It can't be hard, for God's sake.
Yeah, you've got it.
At the end, there's also, you have another piece of memorabilia of historical nature here as well. So we would like to cut the frame, and we want to move over here and finish the conversation. So actually, we've been talking about the historical nature of this pharmacy, and really it's in a historic downtown Harrison, and all the years that Jeff has been down here serving the community. And in the middle aisle, there's a contraption here. Jeff, what is this?
Well, let me set this up first. We mentioned earlier Dr. Marvin, who was I'll say the founding father of the pharmacy in the late 1800s. And Dr. Marvin, as a historical side note for us, Dr. Marvin was the great-grandfather of Barbara Bush, the former First Lady. Now, obviously, Barbara Bush was the mother of George W. Bush, so that means that Dr. Marvin was not only the great-grandfather of a First Lady, he was the great-great-grandfather of a President of the United States.
Yes.
And that was one of my big thrills. A few years back, I was in Texas at the old George Bush's presidential library. In that museum, there is a picture of Dr. Marvin in the Barbara Bush area. So I always thought that was a pretty neat thing to see Dr. Marvin's picture. This contraption here, and we get all sorts of questions about what it is. It is a baking powder mixer and sifter. Dr. Marvin at this store produced their own baking powder in the early 1900s. The long part is considered the mixing area. The chimney portion is the sifting area. And the gears engaged so they could do one operation or they could do both operations at the same time. They did this at least into the 1920s, because when I was in college back in the late 70s, there were some old fellows who had worked here as high school kids and made baking powder. That was the day before you had the Pillsbury in the refrigerator case and things like that. But once upon a time, people did their own baking. This is where it was made in Harrison.
It is, in fact, the apothecaries of the days really drove the comforts of the communities, and it still does today, Jeff, with the work that you do here at the Village Pharmacy. It protects the overall health of the community. It certainly helps to protect my own health and the health of my family, and I very much appreciate all the work that you do.
Well, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, so actually the other little known fun fact of the community of Harrison is I happen to know that Jeff was voted to be most valuable student in his class, in the class of 1980, and I happen to sort of kind of know that because the next year I was voted to be the most valuable student in the class of pharmacy in 81. So, go figure that right here in Harrison, we have two most valuable students in their class.
Yeah.
What an honor that was. So did you have a crazy class or what?
I tell you what, all I can say is, if you and I can be the most outstanding students, I guess pharmacy is a great profession to go into.
Fantastic profession. I highly recommend it to anyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff, for your time today, right here at the Village Pharmacy. Thanks to the community for all your support of the pharmacy, and we'll catch you next time on Highlight Harrison.